And my inner narrative was life is difficult. You have to work hard.
Mm.
So what do? You work hard, you make a bunch of money, you give it to people that don't respect it and didn't work for it, and then they waste it so you can continue to work hard.
Mm.
Welcome to Rock Your Money, Rock Your Life, Brian.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Rock.
Yeah, so a lot of times I get the opportunity to talk to people from North America and people that are very, on this side of the continent. So you are very passionate about helping entrepreneurs, and I always look like entrepreneurs like it's like a sport, right? You got to show up, you got to play full out, you got to adapt, you have to pivot, you have to play on the team with injuries, you got to move things around. So tell us a little bit about what makes you so great at helping entrepreneurs.
So I think, I mean, so interestingly enough, we when COVID hit, we kind of moved away from just working with entrepreneurs to working with a much broader market. But I mean, 60 to 70% of the people that come into our summits and what have you are still, entrepreneurs. And of course, with the shifts in the world, more people have had to look at self-employment rather than call it entrepreneurship in reality, as an option because of what's happened globally. For me, it was all just about growing up with a dad who sacrificed a lot, including connections with us and my mother, his previous wife, his 5 wives in total, because business was to him the most important thing. And then, interestingly enough, 2 things. Number one, he actually created he created a personal fortune 3 times in his life, and then reinvested it into business instead of investing it more intelligently into places that would give him financial freedom. And I mean, he's a highly intelligent man. I always used to say, I would talk about him on stage and I would say like no one taught him, how to create wealth, because as a businessman, he knew how to do business, but he didn't know how to take the money and reinvest it in clever places. And then I was sitting with him a couple of years ago and I told him, this is what I tell people. He said, no, that's rubbish. I said, what? He said, no, I mean, you remember Rob, one of my friends, he's worth like 100 million euros. He told me when I cashed out of one of my public companies, give me a chunk of the money, Jack, and I'll invest it into, the property portfolios I have. And, there was the chairman of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange was the chairman of one of our companies. And he was like, telling my father invested into stocks. And so not only did he get taught, he had incredibly good people to help him. And I don't know why he still sort of says, because he lost it all, Rock. I mean, he lives comfortably, but I mean, like a fraction of what he could have lived. And to create a personal fortune 3 times, I mean, that's unheard of, from business itself, just through profits of business. And then to go and sabotage it, obviously, for some psychological reason and get himself into a situation where, he lives okay, like I said, but not remotely how he should have or could have. And he's 83 today, and he has a lot of regret. And it's interesting that whole story from a child witnessing him not really being there for us emotionally while our mother was a severe alcoholic and died eventually from it and things like that. But always knowing, I admired him as an entrepreneur. Not as a father, ironically, at the beginning. And so I guess, I started at a young age. I didn't know anything better. I was ADD. I sucked at school. I couldn't get any tertiary education. So I started my first business at 16. But I sucked. I mean, I just made mistake after mistake. This is not even true. I didn't make mistake after mistake. I just manifested failure after failure. I would do the right things. And this is the craziest thing we learn as entrepreneurs, that simply doing the right things doesn't guarantee you success. You have to become the right person. So my, massive lack of self-esteem and my big issues and unresolved factors and everything were all party to me living up to the expectation at a subconscious level of what I expected, which was to fail. And so even though I did the right things, I would still fail. And I think that's where the bug sort of got me, because I didn't start to teach entrepreneurs for everyone else for some altruistic reason. I thought man, there's got to be a better way to do this. And, I spent 15 years studying entrepreneurship, trying to figure out how to play the game properly myself. And I actually got to a stage of teaching it correctly because people, because I worked with the top people around the world, but I didn't manifest it still in my own life until, only I really now can say I live a life of real entrepreneur, where you kind of find that balance between wealth creation, meaning in life and freedom and being able to do the things that you love. But for a long time, I stood on stages feeling like a bit of a farce. Although as a teacher, it's not that you have to, like a coach doesn't have to be the best player in the team or best player in the sport. but still it eats away in your head when you're teaching stuff, and especially when people are achieving results based on what you're teaching, but you're not. So this was I'm 50 now. This is a long journey from, childhood witnessing this, going through this process, wanting to help entrepreneurs, but really, I think ultimately all for our own gain first. And then we can more effectively help others when we can, illustrate through our own exemplification that you can live a particular life.
Wow, you said a lot there. So I want to unpack some of that for the listeners. Because you went over basically your money blueprint, the learning of it from witnessing monkey see, monkey do. Your father probably had some unconscious self-sabotaging experiences. You said he had 5 wives?
He was married 5 times,
Yes.
divorced 4 and widowed once. And yeah.
There's strong probability that he had fear of intimacy, which meant that he probably felt some level of feeling of abandonment, and then self-sabotaged himself in the process. You witnessed that. Your mother was an alcoholic, so you didn't have the greatest role models. You went out there, worked your ass off, and modeled some of it, and then taught some of it, but at the same time had some incongruencies, because you were teaching, but you hadn't yet achieved it, which, by the way, happens to a lot of us, myself included. I've taught things that I'm still, trying to learn. But at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is an inner journey, right? And it manifests itself on the outside. But so many people, I think, put on this, this look good face. Social media is really good at that. And everybody wants to look good. But when I dig down deep, most people's lives are pretty messed up on some area, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they have their finances in shape, but their health is atrocious. Or their health is really good and they're running triathlons, but they're never home because they're running away from something. So the journey of Rock Your Money, Rock Your Life is about, what is our relationship with money? What is money? And it's interesting that you said, Brian, that, your father was not a good investor. He was good at maybe making it, but the decisions he made around investing was not that great. And I did that for the first 50 years of my life till 8 years ago. I poured in my businesses, my earnings into stocks and into friends' ventures, like literally a gold mine in Australia. Gave my brother-in-law $250,000, never saw it again. $110,000 to my best friend who went to the Caribbean with an idea. And so I kept on perpetuating what I grew up with, was working on a farm. And my inner narrative was, life is difficult. You have to work hard. So what do? You work hard, you make a bunch of money, you give it to people that don't respect it and didn't work for it. And then they waste it. So you can continue to work hard because that's your identity. So in this journey, it's a lot about talking about what is the identity. And there are people out there that have this thing where they just believe life is not that difficult. And, I met this one person through Tony Robbins. She was a model, actually. And back in the early 2000s, she says, I just put all my money into Apple stock. And I meet her 5 years later and I go, so what did you do with that money? Did you sell it? She goes, no, I just left it there. I saw her 3 years ago. I said, what'd you do? She goes, I still have it all in Apple stock. How do you think she's doing? Right?
Probably pretty well. Yeah.
She has a different belief. She's a multi-millionaire. And I'm not going to say she's just a model, but she's a model that took what she earned and put it into one thing because she had this belief life is pretty easy and whatever. So how now have you pivoted? What do you think your identity with money is?
I think, let me be honest. I think, I still have my challenges. I still work around different factors. I think there's 2 aspects to money. The one is the flow. I think I had one of those classic kind of, I shouldn't earn more than my father kind of, subconscious, belief systems. And I knew 50 was a critical time because that's when he had achieved the pinnacle of his financial goals. So I thought if I just get over 50, I can let go of that stuff, which seems to have been the case because I've managed to manifest a lot more money in life. And I've definitely, systematically become more profit centric, particularly through business with the purpose of investing. I have, unlike my dad, I understand the model a lot better. So I have a lot of really good advisors to make sure I invest sensibly because we're not always the best ourselves. ourselves, and we definitely shouldn't be giving it to our friends, as you learned. And, you know, my dad reinvested into business. That's all he knew. Although he was told other things, he just thought, well, if I've got, you know, $2 million, let me just put it into another business and buy a whole lot of companies out and make that work. And he was good at making things work, but business is never guaranteed. You're always going to make a stumble every now and again. Doesn't matter how good you are. So if you can't. And so what he would inevitably do is manifest like an environment where he would lose all that money. And, you know, eventually your age catches up with you and it becomes difficult to do again. And to him, it was a failure. I always tell him, he started 62 businesses, right? And like many of them were not failures. You know, it's the big ones that he kind of reinvested in the wrong place. But I say to him, your knowledge is probably worth, I mean, that man can talk about so many aspects of, you know, partnering with major multinational corporations to, you know, I mean, he set up diamond companies at the sea. He set up, you know, furniture companies. He was in fishing for years. He's just like, it's crazy. I also spent the first, 15 years of my life in digital media and music industry and publishing and all different types of companies. But I mean, the truth is, I witnessed him make money and us get a lifestyle because of it. I never made the money initially. So clearly there was a blockage even beyond that, which was related to something to that effect. Now, making the money is something I definitely feel like that ceiling's been broken in terms of we're actually kind of surprised how much money we make and how much profit we make. Now, the real question is whether that behavior can transcend into taking as much of that money and putting it away and doing it consistently. And it's interesting because, you know, when we're notorious spenders, and boy, I'm a notorious spender, it's amazing how the craziest things materialize for things to spend money on that, you know, like these unexpected expenses. And that still shows an imbalance in a way, in my opinion, you know, until you find a place where you can budget and actually manage that comfortably without having these like weird things come in. For me, the weird things are small and very manageable, but they're still there. So I think the key thing is, the breaking the ceiling of earning was definitely a big challenge, which I overcame. And then I have in a partnership in my business now, my sort of, junior partner is very involved and we both very profit centric. He was actually a student of mine for years. And so we're now playing the game in entrepreneurship. It's about playing the game of budgeting, of forecasting, of analyzing your results on a regular basis, of understanding your finances and maximizing profitability. I might not be the best at saving myself to wealth, which is something most people should do, at least to a degree. But I could probably do what my father did, which is make millions. And then the question is, my dad's still alive? And he's like, you better not repeat the mistakes. I said, well, Dad, I hope I won't. And that's what I hope you get to witness, because, you know, it would be nice to know that I could accumulate a few $1 million like in a year in proper, safe investments that are never going to be touched, that are going to give me financial freedom. And I think, you know, it's a subtle difference really. But the bigger challenge for me was really to be able to consistently earn a lot of money to become profitable. And it's a challenge for 90% of entrepreneurs out there. You know, they survival businesses, they're survivalists. They don't really understand the concept of profit and dividends and stuff like that.